Hey, want to hear a story? Okay, so Gen Con. Gen Con, the biggest tabletop role-playing game convention in the United States of America, where you can try out games from both big publishers as well as indie publishers. Tons of booths, panels, lots of awesome guests. It's a great old time. I mean, I've never been because I don't really like conventions, but I'm sure it's wonderful. I've heard it's great. At Gen Con, there is a little award show. Emphasis on little, no shade intended, but the Any Awards, Gen Con's awards for tabletop role-playing games, they're not exactly the Oscars. They're not exactly the Gamer Awards. Hell, they're not even QT Cinderella's Streamer Awards. It's a really small, humble affair. But if anything, that's what makes it so charming. And while it is a niche award show in a niche industry, the Any Awards do allow a lot of indie games to get publicity. The Any Awards are not only awarding big publishers, they also highlight a lot of lesser-known RPGs. So, if you get an opportunity to get nominated for an Any Award, you'd probably take it as a small game dev, right? Well, the developers behind Lancer RPG had a bit of a different perspective. They submitted their game, which by all accounts was a very successful mech-based tabletop role-playing game, to the Ennies, and then very publicly pulled their game out of consideration, a game that almost definitely would have been nominated when they submitted in 2020. So, why? Well, they said this. Hey, weird question, but does anyone else remember that time that a Willy Wonka blueberry-themed adventure featuring prominent won a gold Ennie for Best Adventure in 2017? The Lancer developers, they've got to be exaggerating or something, right? I mean, an adventure like that, winning Best Adventure of the Year, that's crazy talk. It can't be that bad. And yeah, the book that they're talking about, Blood in the Chocolate, is not that bad. The developers behind Lancer were wrong with their public condemnation. Because in actuality, Blood in the Chocolate is so much worse than how they portrayed it in that tweet. Oh my god, when I started looking into this, I didn't realize I was jumping down a rabbit hole. A rabbit hole that involves bitter game devs, random racism, a very, very strange book, probably the strangest I've ever read, and at the end, redemption. So, today, on Critical Failure, we're asking the question we always do. What the hell happened? Okay, so before we get really dug into it, I want to say that I'm going to be saying a lot of RPG names throughout this video. RPGs that you almost definitely haven't played or don't have experience with. I'm going to do my best to minimize acronyms and do my best to explain everything that I'm talking about, just so no one gets lost in the sauce like I did while researching this. So, the book that we're talking about is an adventure module, and adventure modules are for systems like Pathfinder or Dungeons & Dragons. In this case, though, we are talking about a system called Lamentations of the Flame Princess. This is an OSR system. OSR stands for Old School Revival, and this is a movement to bring back some of the original charm of tabletop role-playing games, back during their origin in the 70s, 80s, etc. I've seen some good games come out of this, and from most of what I can see, Lamentations of the Flame Princess is a game that's decently well-liked. While grabbing my B-roll, I went to the Lamentations of the Flame Princess website. A bunch of the titles are stuff like Eldridge Cock and Vaginas Are Magic. You're meant to play this game system with one hand, aren't you? But while Lamentations of the Flame Princess may not be breaking the minds of OSR enthusiasts, it did have something that really made it stand out, and that is that James, the developer behind Lamentations of the Flame Princess, had a very, very attractive deal for authors who wanted to write modules for his book. you could get royalties of 21 cents per word, even at low sales, which for budding indie devs, that sounds like a dream come true. So a lot of people were jumping onto Lamentations of the Flame Princess to develop games and make new adventures for the system. It gave the system a really healthy flow of content as long as James was willing to pay those royalties. Now, before we move on, I will say, put a pin in good old James, the developer behind Lamentations of the Flame Princess. He's not going to be relevant for a little bit, but put a pin in him, because we're coming back to him, don't worry. Anyway, now that we have that pin, it's time to move on. With all these games coming in, it's inevitable that one of them is going to suck. And in that case, we have Blood in the Chocolate, our award-winning adventure. I mean, it's an award winner. It can't be that bad, right? I mean, you know, it won, so it has to be good. It has to be. Look, I could not summarize Blood in the Chocolate better than this review on WordPress of all things. Blood in the Chocolate is the first Lamentations of the Flame Princess product that I found genuinely off-putting. You get the feeling the author wrote the adventure with one hand, if you get my drift. And yeah, I get your drift. This is a world full of inflation, assault, and racism, based on Willy Wonka. Now, the idea of a darker take on the world of Willy Wonka sounds like a great idea, but when you step into this magical world, you quickly see the first problem with this book, and that is the primary enemy that you're going to be fighting throughout the halls of this magical chocolate factory. And that enemy is known as pygmies. Yeah, that's a term without any historical baggage. Well, it can't be that bad. I mean, if you read the text, they're described verbatim as subhuman creatures from the darkest recesses of Peru who work for and worship their corporate overlord like she's their prophet, who are almost animal-like in the way that you ally with them. The way I read it, it's almost more like they're being tamed. And besides, why would you even do that? Allying with them is only like a small little footnote. The vast majority of the book encourages them to be just slaughtered en masse, because that's really what they are. They're fodder to be chewed through. And yeah, that's all really uncomfortable, isn't it? Don't worry, it gets worse though. Let me make this clear. These people are not some fantasy race that bear similarities to actual native Peruvian peoples. No, these are actually just a fictional native Peruvian tribe who have been mutated into these monsters. They're not native coded. They're just indigenous people who have been transformed into monsters and put into this factory so that you, as the players, can probably slaughter them en masse. Oh, and by the way, if you're trying to free them from their corporate overlord, who is essentially keeping them in slavery, don't worry, you basically can't. I read through all the endings of the book and I was blown away. But if you destroy this factory and set them free, they all instantaneously freeze to death in the Netherlands, and their bodies become bad omens for the people there. Awesome. The best ending, seemingly, is if you take over the factory and they worship you as their new god. But don't worry, though, I guess you can be a benevolent god to these exploited native people. What's even crazier is, when I was first reading through the book, I didn't read it like page for page at my very first look. I skimmed it, and when I saw these people, I thought, oh, they were corrupted by this corporate overlord that rules over them like a goddess. She has transformed them into these creatures so that she can force them to work in her factory. That would be tragic and sad, and while the imagery would still absolutely be problematic in a lot of different ways, at least there would be something there for the narrative. But no, that's not what happened. These people did this to themselves. These native people ate from cursed cocoa beans that were grown from the dead bodies of Mayan shamans, and then it turned them into these creatures over time. I could not believe that when I first read it. Again, these are not a fantasy race. Peruvian indigenous people are real people who exist right now in our world. They have a diverse, beautiful culture that spans across many, many countries. They have suffered and gone through some terrible things throughout history, and despite everything, they have maintained their culture. And in this book, they are represented as subhuman, savage creatures exploited by a corporate overlord because they did it to themselves. That's, kind of uncomfortable, isn't it? But, again, like I said, you can, in theory, get some of these people on your side. You can align with them using your skill checks in the game, and they can help you to take over the factory. Again, they're never going to be classified as people. They're always subhuman, but hey, still, at least you can get these subhuman creatures to fight alongside you. How do you do that, though? Well, there are a variety of requirements, and one of the possible ones is that you need to participate in the berry to its climax. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. You're thinking, Crispy, you can't just leave us hanging like that. You have to share your knowledge of the berry with us. You need to tell us all about this event in the book that was written and edited and then put in the table and then published. You have to explain it in detail. We're practically dying to know, and you know what? I'm so glad that you asked.
The following program contains nudity and, oh my god, why are you even watching this? Just run away. This shit is going to give you nightmares. We can't warn you strongly enough. Do you need a doctor of some kind? What is the matter with you?
This is just from the book. A person of a random gender infected with the noxious berry curse has become ripe and is now being cut into by 2d6 pygmies and the writhing mass of tiny pygmy bodies thrust and grind against the person as they bleed juice and cry. They scream before finally exploding in a spray of blue viscera. The pygmies believe that the wet leavings of a berry cursed creature nourishes the soil of the old growth. Ew, oh god, ew. Can we clean this up? I didn't think we'd have to get a replacement clone on this series. For God's sakes, was it even that oh my god! First and foremost, I think this gets rid of any argument that these native people are not just monsters in the game. Like, don't worry, you can get them on your side. You just need to commit with them. Oh my god. Okay, so it's time to talk about just like the general uncomfortableness of this entire book. I called this an incel fantasy for a reason, because it sounds like an incel with a thing for inflation. The pygmies' leader is described as fat and swollen and massive, and all the pygmies use a poison that makes you as the player characters fat and swollen and massive. And here at the berry orgy, here at the berry cuddle puddle, you also have a victim who is fat and swollen, and I can't keep going with this, man. Seriously, it is everywhere in this book. It is the primary threat that you face. Even the main bad guy, the corporate overlord that rules over this entire base of operations, she is an evil corporate lesbian who is big and fat and swollen and will try to seduce player characters. Like, it's seriously, it's unavoidable. Like, there were a couple 5-star reviews that said this adventure is really super well designed. You just need to ignore the things if you aren't comfortable with them. But like, dude, the pygmies are the primary enemy of the entire book. You're supposed to fight through swaths and swaths of them. If anything, by the by, that's one of the things I dislike about it. There is very little enemy variety. You are fighting against the same kind of swarm all the time. It is a frickin' slog, and that is something that I saw in more long-form reviews of the book that weren't just glazing the damn thing for some reason. Besides that, I mean, this inflation thing, it's constant. It's everywhere. And look, if you're into that, that's awesome. But, I mean, dang, I really hope the rest of your group is into it too. Like, yeah, the berry cuddle puddle scene can be, in theory, just skipped over. But it doesn't mean it's not weird as hell whenever I flip past the page and just see it there. Just see it writhing in all its horrific glory. Seriously, I can't believe I had to read that. Why did I do that to myself? It's cringe. This book is cringe. It makes me cringe. This book is embarrassing. Reading through it, it is embarrassing. So, if the book is so embarrassing, how the hell did it win Best Adventure of the Year? Well, actually, I think there's a pretty simple explanation. The Annie Awards have you vote for who wins. And yeah, I think that's good, by the way. I do like it when award shows have that kind of system. But when you have a really small award show like the Ennies in a niche community, a community that for the most part doesn't even pay attention to the Annie Awards in the first place, it becomes really easy to astroturf the award show, to gain the system to your side by just getting like 50 people to vote for you. And when Lancer, hooking it back to the top, when Lancer called out the Ennies in their tweet, retracting their own submission to the award show, the Ennies actually did privately reach out to Lancer and ask them if they're pulling out. And Lancer, once again, did ask, like, hey, do you have an explanation for why Blood and the Chocolate won? And the Ennies just completely said, look, it was the voters. The voters did it. Now, why the Ennies allowed Blood and the Chocolate to be nominated with the content that it featured, that's something that happened behind closed doors. I have no idea why they did that. The Ennies claim they've had a change in leadership, and yeah, I'd believe them. Nothing like this has happened since, and it's been almost 8 years, so good track record so far, but this was a pretty damn massive goof on their part. Lancer actually did end up pulling out of the award show completely. And well, yeah, I've been ragging on the Ennies being small. For a game like Lancer, a small indie RPG, it was pretty ballsy of them to turn down any publicity with the Annie Awards. I mean, you might be thinking like, oh, well, they got publicity from the tweets they were making. Dude, they were getting what, like 300 to 700 likes? I mean, whatever publicity they were having, it's among the audience they already had. The Ennies could have actually allowed them to grow past what they already were, but they chose not to. And they grew on their own. Lancer ended up being a pretty successful game. It's popped up in a bunch of my videos, and you know what? Good for them. But not everyone was on Lancer's side when it came to pulling out the Ennies over Blood and the Chocolate. Most notably, James. Remember James? Told you to put a pin in him. The chief writer behind Lamentations of the Flame Princess. Well, I don't know for a fact that he was the one penning these tweets, but like I've heard him talk, and he is the chief owner of Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and it was the Lamentations of the Flame Princess account saying these things, so like, yeah, it was almost definitely him. Fan voting determines who wins these awards. The Ennies didn't give this to us. The public did. So, get any award-winning Blood in the Chocolate here. Now, if you go on to try and purchase Blood in the Chocolate at that link that he left, you'll find that it's actually impossible. And that's where we get to the biggest plot twist of the story. James is the owner of Lamentations of the Flame Princess. He wrote the system, but he didn't write the adventure book. It was a different author who did that, and he had very different opinions about Blood in the Chocolate. I've been calling the author this whole time because he seems like he wants to move on from Blood in the Chocolate, and you know what? I'm okay with letting him because the author is the one who took the book off of drive-thru-RPG and the person who put out a very long apology on Tumblr, of all things, apologizing for the content in the book. He returned his gold award to the Ennies. He stopped working for Lamentations of the Flame Princess entirely, in large part, not just due to Blood and the Chocolate, but also due to James's behavior as the guy who runs the ship. And he went out of his way to try and educate himself and to choose to be better. I am disowning Blood in the Chocolate entirely and unaccepting the award for it. I regret my part in its production and promotion. I know it was wrong, and since its publication, I am doing what I can to be better. The rights reverted back to the author in 2021. By that point, nobody even remembered Blood in the Chocolate. I don't even think anyone acknowledged that it was taken off of drive-thru-RPG. No one cared. It's not like this guy was trying to revive a streaming career or get a self-help business off the ground with his apology. And that, to me, is the real lesson of Blood in the Chocolate. Yeah, this book is like next level bad. And for the record, you don't need to think that the author is some hero or saint. Yeah, he messed up big by writing this thing. It is a blatantly racist, really weird and creepy book that, in my opinion, is also poorly designed as just an adventure module. But does that damn the author for all time? Hell no. Look, guys like Arcadum, guys like Satine Phoenix, hell, guys like James, the dude behind Lamentation of the Flame Princess, these people don't apologize because they actually feel bad. They apologize to get something out of you. I can talk about James and Lamentations of the Flame Princess all the live long day. I can talk about his weird relationship with Zach Sabbath. And if you don't know who that guy is, half his wiki page looks like this, which... awesome, man. Good stuff. I could talk about James's embarrassing attempt to promote his game with Jordan Peterson with this photo. And if you got right-wing Kermit the Frog over here making this face with a thumbs down at your book, man, you know your shit ain't right. I could talk about all that, but I don't really want to, man. I just want to end on the fact that people can always choose to learn, to grow. And that makes me just a little bit more hopeful about the world that we live in. Keep that in mind as we keep on making fun of people. It's a shame that not everyone chooses to do that, but in any case, that was the sordid tale of Blood in the Chocolate. Fun one, right? If you guys enjoyed, you might enjoy this previous episode of Critical Failure, where we covered Gabe James Games, another man who definitely did not choose to be better, unfortunately. Linked up there in the cards. But before you go, please do leave a like on this one and subscribe to Crispy's Tavern so you don't miss any of our content. And finally, if you want to leave your own recommendations or thoughts, you can head down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment being better to let me know at the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.